Cathay Pacific. For decades, that name just meant prestige, precision. It was basically a symbol for the unstoppable rise of Hong Kong itself. But then, in just a few short years, this absolute icon of the skies was brought to its knees. So, we're going to dive into this story, because trust me, it's not just about an airline. It's really about the changing fate of a whole global city.
Okay, I want you to just picture this for a second. The legendary checkerboard turn into Hong Kong's old Kai Tak Airport. I mean, it was heart-stopping. It was so daring, and it was just the perfect symbol for an airline that could expertly navigate this incredibly complex world. This was Cathay Pacific at the absolute peak of its powers.
And the contrast between that image and, well, the image of today is just staggering. You go from that dynamic symbol of precision to this, a silent fleet just parked in the Australian desert, bleeding billions of dollars. So the big question, the one we have to ask, is how on earth did this happen?
Right, so to understand the fall, you've really got to understand the rise. Let's take a look at how Cathay Pacific became so just completely intertwined with the identity of Hong Kong. So the story starts out really small, back in 1946, with just a single plane they called Betsy. But the real game changer, the moment that set its trajectory, was when the British-run Swire Group took control. They created this relentlessly commercial, totally premium-focused airline. And then, wow, the arrival of the Boeing 747 in '79. That was it. That's what turned them into a true global force, and eventually a founding member of the One World Alliance.
And their reputation? It was all built on delivering this absolutely exceptional experience. I mean, get this. They put personal TVs in every single seat way back in 1996. They pioneered a premium economy class that was genuinely a huge step up. This obsession with quality really paid off. It earned them the world's best airline title 4 separate times. They were, without a doubt, aviation royalty.
But here's the thing. There was this central, dangerous paradox at the heart of it all. You see, Cathay's greatest strength was also its fatal flaw. Unlike, say, an airline in the US or mainland China, it had absolutely no domestic market to fall back on. Its entire business model depended on one thing and one thing only: the free, uninterrupted flow of international traffic through Hong Kong. And that total dependence, well, it made it uniquely, incredibly vulnerable.
And that vulnerability, it was about to be exposed in the most brutal way imaginable. The airline was flying directly into a perfect storm of politics and, well, a plague. It all kicks off in the summer of 2019, when Hong Kong erupts in pro-democracy protests. Now, first, Cathay tries to take a pretty neutral, Western corporate stance, defending their staff's right to participate. Well, Beijing's reaction was swift and it was severe. The mainland's aviation authority basically issued an ultimatum. Either you ban any staff involved in the protests from flying into Chinese airspace, or you face what was essentially a corporate death sentence. The pressure was just immense, and it all ended with the shock resignation of their British CEO, Rupert Hogg.
You have to understand, this was a huge moment. It was really the first time Beijing used its immense regulatory power to enforce political loyalty on a major Hong Kong company. That invisible firewall that had always separated Hong Kong's free market from mainland politics, it had been breached. And Cathay Pacific, it became the canary in the coal mine for every other international business in that city.
So, just as the airline is reeling from this huge political blow, you'd think it couldn't get any worse. Well, it did. The entire world changed. This wounded airline flew headfirst into a crisis that was about to strike at the very heart of its business model.
So while a lot of other countries were starting to figure out how to live with the virus, Hong Kong went in the opposite direction, with a super rigid zero-COVID policy. And the result for Cathay? Well, by April 2020, its passenger capacity was slashed by a staggering 97%. 97! It was complete operational paralysis.
And the human cost, it was just immense. In one single massive restructuring, the company was forced to cut 8,500 jobs. That's nearly a quarter of its entire workforce. Just gone.
And the financial bleeding? Oh, it was catastrophic. With basically zero passenger revenue coming in, the airline posted a record net loss of $2.8 billion. That's with a B, billion US dollars. And that was just for 2020.
And look, this wasn't just a one-off bad year. The losses were relentless. They just kept coming, year after year. We're talking 21.6 billion Hong Kong dollars in the red in 2020, then another 5.5 billion in 2021, and another 6.5 billion in 2022. I mean, the airline was on the absolute brink of total collapse. Okay, so with the company about to go under, the Hong Kong government had to step in. But this was not just a simple financial lifeline. Oh no, this was a rescue that came with a leash, one that would fundamentally change the airline's identity forever. The whole bailout was this huge, complex, 39 billion Hong Kong dollar package. The government bought a bunch of shares directly, the existing shareholders had to inject a ton of new cash, and a massive loan was made available. The bottom line is, it saved the airline from going under, period.
But, and this is a huge but, here's the monumental price it paid for that survival. The Hong Kong government became a direct shareholder. It took about a 6% stake, and, maybe even more importantly, it got the right to appoint 2 observers to the airline's board. All of a sudden, this fiercely independent, British-managed icon was now partially state-owned.
So this new reality has led to a recovery that's been, well, messy and pretty dysfunctional. So now we get to the final act of this story, where the airline is facing brand new, existential threats in its battle for the skies. Now, on paper, when Hong Kong finally reopened in 2023, things looked great. All that pent-up demand led to a stunning financial turnaround. I'm talking its best profit in over a decade. But that financial success was masking a deeply dysfunctional reality. On the ground and in the air, things were just chaotic. So what was causing all this chaos? Well, it turns out that during the pandemic, those mass layoffs and really punishing quarantine rules triggered a mass exodus of experienced pilots. The airline was left trying to operate with roughly half the number of captains and first officers it had before the crisis. They didn't just lose money during those years, they lost their single most critical asset, their people. And the consequences of that pilot shortage became embarrassingly public. I mean, just imagine this. During the peak holiday season, the airline was forced to cancel over 780 flights at the last minute. Thousands of passengers were left stranded. This led to, as you can imagine, a furious public backlash and a pretty harsh public shaming from its new government stakeholder. But honestly, the biggest long-term threat might be the fact that Hong Kong just isn't the dominant hub it used to be. You see, Beijing is creating this massive integrated airport cluster in the whole region. So Cathay now finds itself in a direct fight with these giant, expanding mainland airports in Guangzhou and Shenzhen, which are just a stone's throw away. Hong Kong is no longer the only game in town. And that brings us to this final, really provocative question. The fate of Cathay Pacific has always been completely tied to the fate of Hong Kong. So if the city loses its unique status as this essential global gateway, if it becomes, in essence, just another major Chinese city, will passengers and cargo just start to bypass it? And if that happens, you have to wonder, does the world still need a premium long-haul airline base there? Does the world still need Cathay Pacific?